Hello, I'm Sam Schaefer with the Poultry Science Association, and welcome to PSA's Let's Squawk About It. Today, we're discussing a topic that's garnered a lot of attention in the past few months: the cost of eggs. There's been a lot of speculation as to why the costs have risen so drastically, but we're happy to welcome Darrin Karcher of Purdue University to help us understand the facts behind these increases. Darrin, welcome.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Welcome back to Let's Squawk About It. We're happy to have you on again to talk about egg prices. So, Darrin, let's dive right in. When we look at the cost of eggs, let's first address three items. The first one being labor shortages and inflation being a driving factor.
Yeah, so when we look at that, we know that we in the egg industry, very much like every other industry currently, is facing a labor shortage. And so that is causing some of the strain and stress that we're seeing with our egg prices. Finding those individuals to help us in the production of those eggs, work in those processing plants. And then we couple that with our current state of inflation and what's happening there. And yeah, it's just a happy little storm that's occurring at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. But as we know, labor shortages and inflation are just one factor that is causing the increase in egg prices. There's also been a push towards cage-free eggs and the cost of production behind cage-free eggs, which is something that you and I had discussed on your previous visit with to Let's Squawk About It. So, can we talk about the cost of cage-free eggs and how that can affect the cost of eggs?
Yeah. So when we look at cage free eggs, right, it's really not as much. There is an increased cost, right, as we build cage free facilities. But the bigger portion of that is when we think about the states that have now legislatively mandated or have restrictions on the types of eggs or egg products that can be allowed into their state. All of a sudden you go from saying having 100% potential to bring in eggs to your state to all of a sudden reducing it if you're cage free restricted to about 39% of the eggs produced are cage free. So you all of a sudden change that pool of eggs that you can have available to those consumers within the marketplace.
hmm And as we discussed previously, the setup and transition to a cage-free production is not cheap.
Correct, correct. There's going to be that associated cost. Producers will do as much as they can to mitigate that cost being passed along to the actual customer or the consumer. The other piece to think about when we talk about this cage-free cost is even though the egg producers are producing a very low cost high protein food, there are other people within that supply chain that are also having to add on their additional costs associated with getting that egg from the chicken house to the marketplace for the consumer.
hmm
So don't have a misperception that just because I pay $5 a dozen eggs, that that's all going back to the actual producer. There is a long list of people within that supply chain that are all taking a piece of that $5
hmm
before it actually gets back to the producer.
Absolutely. And of course, we talked about cage-free setup and the costs implemented there, but another thing is chicken feed, and something that a lot of folks had taken to social media and created a lot of misconceptions under is that chicken feed was being made with a different formula that caused chickens to produce fewer proteins that would lead to fewer egg production. So, can we talk about that and dispel that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's been a really interesting scenario. We do know that the cost of feed is going to influence those egg costs that we see in the store. This misnomer about how we are purposely um, misformulating feeds to ensure that we see a decrease in the amount of eggs that are being produced so that we can elevate those egg costs for everyone. Yeah, that is a great misnomer. There are feed formulations that can occur, and there are changes that may result in that feed that is being fed to those birds. However, every time those feeds are reformulated or we have new items being brought into that formulation, those diets are still meeting those dietary needs of those birds in order to produce those eggs. Probably the bigger thing that hasn't been a lot of play in social media at the moment is the fact that if we look at the time of year, that is likely the bigger indicator that we are either losing some eggs, have lost some eggs, or starting to see our eggs come into production again, because we know that we have a change in day length, which is a much higher influence on the ability of those birds to lay the eggs.
Hmm. Yeah, that was something I was thinking of. Isn't it important to also consider that, chickens go through an ebb and flow as far as their production is concerned. They're not going to produce all year long consistently. I mean, they're animals. Nature will be nature. So it's also important to remember things change at different points of the year.
Exactly. And it also factors in your management, right, Sam? So if you are artificially lighting those birds, yes, you may have them producing pretty close to an egg every single day. If you're relying on Mother Nature to supply that natural light for you, just like our songbirds and other wild birds that we have, we're going to see that tapering of egg production in the fall and over the winter months. And then we start to see them come back into production here in the spring as those day lengths get longer.
Absolutely. And it's also important to consider, if you have a backyard flock, doing your research on the type of birds that you are purchasing, because of course there are layers that are going to produce more higher quantities of eggs than there are other, say, like heritage breeds that are more appealing for their looks. So the type of bird is
Exactly.
also important.
Yep. That makes a world of difference.
Yes. All right, so we covered labor shortages, push towards cage-free, chicken feed, but are there any additional factors that have caused increases in egg prices? For example, the egg industry has previously kept prices low without raising them to account for production costs. Is that something that's factored into this equation too?
So when we look at the egg industry, they are still producing a low cost product for the consumers. The other thing that we really haven't touched on today is we still have some supply chain issues. And so some of our problems or some of our costs that we are seeing are associated more with the fact that we don't have the necessary means to get the eggs where they need to go. So when you start factoring in the supply chain, the labor, the welfare implications or ramifications across states, and you start adding in all of those things together, that's where it has led us to this issue that we have. The other big thing that everybody coming into the first of the year, when egg prices started to really be noticed, we were coming out of a holiday. And there is a huge demand for eggs in the holidays, just like there will be this coming weekend.
Mhm.
As we're moving into Easter, we're going to have a huge demand for eggs again. And so when you have supply chain issues and everybody wants eggs, unfortunately, that's going to be a price opportunity, not necessarily for the producer, but for those individuals that are selling you those eggs.
Hmm. Absolutely. And it's always kind of easy to forget about it once prices are low again. And when they rise again, it's a shock. But we need to
Exactly.
keep in mind this is also part of the ebb and flow of egg cost, egg production. It's all part of the system.
And in general, it's animal agriculture.
Yeah. None of it's always predictable.
Nope, not at all.
All right. Well, thank you, Darren, for joining us. Before we sign off today, is there anything else you would like to plug specifically? I know you have the Shell Egg Academy coming up in April. It'll be virtual. But if there's anything else you want to talk about with that, please feel free.
Oh, sure. So the Shell Egg Academy is a workforce development program. And so, as you said, in April here, we have a virtual training for individuals that are either in the production house or in the egg processing plant. And then in September, we'll actually have a in-person Shell Egg Academy here at Purdue University, where the target is more the upper management, and we try to help them make those connections to be able to go back and be more effective team members within their companies.
Excellent. Well, I know on my end, as a PSA representative, I look forward to the Shell Egg Academy. I'll be attending this year, so I'm pretty excited to get that 101 poultry knowledge and kind of some insider looks into the production, some of the terminology, and all of that stuff that comes with the workshop.
And we look forward to having you, Sam.
Excellent. Well, Darrin, thank you so much again. We will link information to Shell Egg Academy in the description. And Darrin, we'll talk to you again later.
Thanks. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.